Successful businesses understand the value an effective environmental management system brings to an organisation. ISO 14001 has served the business community's need to establish, implement and maintain such a system since the 1990s. This is the first time since publication that we have seen a significant update to the standard. I'm here today to talk to Nigel Leehane to find out why the changes have been made and what they mean for businesses going forward. Can I start by asking you what led ISO to decide to revise ISO 14001 and what did it consider when initially shaping the new standard?
Well, ISO has a formal process to determine when there's a need to revise a standard, and that involves consulting all of its members internationally. And in the UK, BSI is that member of ISO. And the response to this particular consultation was that there was an overwhelming demand for a revision. ISO 14001 was published initially in 1996. And it went through a minor revision in 2004, and now it's recognised that the time's come for a more fundamental revision to meet the needs of the 21st century and the next 10 years in particular. And in that process, ISO also introduced the requirement to conform to a new set of guidelines that it's introduced for management system standards, in that all of them now have to adopt a common structure and core text to encourage sort of consistency between management system standards, which will allow organisations to better integrate their management systems for environment and quality and health and safety, etc.
Nigel, you attended the International Working Group meeting. Can you explain the main changes in the revision to ISO 14001?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some quite fundamental changes. Some are prompted by Annex SL, which introduces new requirements for all management system standards. That includes things like leadership and top management, and the requirements for top management to be more involved and taking accountability for the effectiveness of the environmental management system. It also deals with the context of the organisation, a strategic step in understanding where the organisation operates, its own internal environment in terms of its technologies and capabilities and culture, the kind of natural environment it finds itself operating in, and the natural risks or the risks to the natural environment that it may pose, and also external socio and economic factors that have a bearing on the organisation's goals. And the anticipation is that by undertaking this review of its context, it's better placed to develop its environmental strategy and develop a suitable and effective environmental management system. The working group also addressed needs very much specific to ISO 14001 and environmental management. So there are new requirements for ensuring organisations understand whether or not they're complying with the obligations on them, which may come through legislation or other obligations that they've accepted perhaps from their clients or other stakeholders. There's a requirement to focus on performance in terms of actual environmental performance rather than how well their management system is working. And also there's new emphasis on the supply chain. So taking a life cycle perspective and considering impacts not just within their own boundaries, but those impacts that are created as a result of their engagement with their suppliers and through the delivery of their products and services.
Can you tell us more about the greater emphasis on sustainability in the new standard?
I think it's long been recognised that 14001 has perhaps unintentionally encouraged organisations to focus too much on preventing pollution, managing hazardous substances, dealing with waste, and concentrating on those perhaps dirtier elements of the way they interact with the natural environment, rather than taking a broader view of looking at sustainability in terms of how they operate in ways like reducing their energy consumption, which may not have a direct impact on the environment from their own operations, but obviously consumes electricity generated elsewhere. So by taking that broader approach, they are in effect reducing their own operating costs and becoming more competitive and becoming hopefully more sustainable in the long term.
So can you explain why there's a new focus on leadership?
The revised standard includes many new requirements for top management, including specific requirements mandated for them to perform, including communicating the importance of good environmental management, to provide support to staff who have environmental management responsibilities, and very importantly to ensure that environmental management is embraced by other business processes. And this will only encourage businesses to adopt better environmental management practices and hopefully to ally them with good sustainability approaches that produce added value for the business as a whole.
Why did ISO feel it's important to highlight risks and opportunities throughout the new standard?
Well, this is a new requirement introduced by Annex SL again for all management system standards, but 14001 has always dealt with risk in what we've termed environmental aspects, which is the way in which organisations and their activities interact with the environment. So the new requirements are broader in that we now have to think about not just the risks to the environment from what we're doing, but also be prepared to deal with changing environmental conditions that could have could present a risk or a threat to the business itself. And that could perhaps be the effects of climate change. We also need to think more broadly about the risks and opportunities for the organisation in terms of, we've talked about sustainability and we've talked about integrating environmental management into business practices and adding value to the business as a whole. And this is how they can identify those risks and opportunities to do that.
How was the supply chain dealt with in the new standard?
Well, the revised text deals with many issues relating to the supply chain, and it was decided to integrate supply chain into overall operational control. This has resulted in organisations being given the opportunity to think more widely about the whole life cycle, or a life cycle perspective of what they do, their own operations and what they can control directly, and how far they can extend control and influence into the supply chain. But emphasise, of course, there's no requirement for them to carry out detailed life cycle analyses of every stage of the broader life cycle and the supply chain, but to perhaps identify where there are major impacts that they can help to ameliorate in collaboration with their suppliers and with their customers. And that then delivers benefits both to the organisation itself. It may reduce the costs, say, of bringing in raw materials, and it may reduce the environmental impact of the actual extraction and preparation of those raw materials, and reduce the supplier's costs as well. So it really does provide a great opportunity for delivering value throughout the supply chain.
So tell us, how should an organisation prepare themselves?
Well, firstly, they should obtain a copy of the standard and make sure they understand its requirements. And for organisations embarking on the development of an EMS for the first time, that means all the requirements of the standard. For those who are transitioning to the new requirements of 14001/2015, then that means those additional requirements that are going to require them to modify their systems. So once they understand those, then they need to carry out a gap analysis of their system and determine where they need to make those changes. And this really should be seen as an opportunity to revitalise and refresh their management systems, regardless just of the specific requirements of 14001/2015. It's a chance to review the whole process and to improve it and make sure it's fit for purpose, and so it adds value to the management of the business as a whole.
Nigel, you're a practitioner, so what impact, if any, will the new revised standard have on business as a whole?
I think it's important to remember that the organisation needs to start off by considering its context and the way it wants to go, and that will determine how it develops its system, how much effort goes into that, and the areas that it wants to manage. Organisations shouldn't be afraid of the changes to 14001. The working group has worked hard to make sure that the new requirements are realistic and feasible for organisations to implement, to encourage them to make genuine improvement in environmental management, but without imposing unnecessary obligations on them.
With the new standard in place, organisations will find it easier to incorporate their environmental management system into core business processes, improve environmental performance, and gain greater value from their operations.